When the weight of the world presses down and every breath feels like an act of courage, there is something that cannot be explained by reason or named by sight, something that moves quietly beneath the surface of all chaos. It is that invisible power, that presence that people have called by many names: love, grace, light, peace, but to the heart that has known despair, it is simply God. In those moments when darkness feels thicker than the air itself, when the mind cannot see any way forward, there comes a stillness, almost imperceptible, as if the universe pauses to whisper, "You are not alone." There are times in life when every plan breaks apart and every effort feels wasted. You stand amid the fragments of what you thought your life would be, staring at the wreckage and wondering if anything can be rebuilt. Yet, in that ruin, there is the soft pulse of divine possibility. It is not loud, it never shouts. It moves like a breath, like dawn spreading through the night, promising that even now, a second chance is being shaped in the unseen. Imagine the heart that once walked in love but fell into misunderstanding, the friendship that dissolved in pride, the dream that withered under fear. We carry those stories as unfinished prayers. And sometimes, when God says, "Someone wants a second chance with you because of this," it is not merely about the person, it is about the soul itself, about the work that pain began and grace will complete. You may not notice it at first. Life continues with its noise and its routine. But one evening, as you sit alone, perhaps after another weary day, you feel something different. The air is thick with memory, yet lighter somehow. You begin to sense that forgiveness is near, not as a decision, but as a presence. It feels as if the invisible hand that once lifted you from the pit of despair is now turning your heart toward mercy. You remember that there was a time you could not stand on your own, and yet here you are, breathing again, walking again, living again. That memory itself is evidence of divine strength. The second chance God offers is rarely dramatic. It does not arrive wrapped in thunder or angels. It begins as a soft desire to understand, to release the grip of old pain. It begins when you stop rehearsing what went wrong and start wondering what could be right if only love were allowed to speak again. This is how God works, through the quiet transformation of the heart. Sometimes that second chance comes through another person. Someone you thought was gone forever appears again, not to reopen wounds, but to remind you that grace is stronger than distance. They may say, "I've been thinking of you," and though the words are simple, they tremble with the weight of everything unsaid. Or perhaps they do not come back at all, and yet you feel their presence in your prayers, as if the love that once connected you still lives in another form. In either case, the message is the same: God is not finished. Every act of redemption begins in the unseen. Before a single door reopens, before a single heart says yes, God is already moving in the hidden chambers of the Spirit. While you sleep, while you weep, while you surrender, that invisible power is aligning circumstances, healing hearts, preparing the way for what your faith has not yet dared to imagine. There was a man who once thought his life had ended. He had made choices he regretted and spoken words he could not unsay. He believed that forgiveness was for others, not for him. For years he carried guilt like a stone in his chest. But one night, when he could no longer bear the silence, he whispered, "God, if you still see anything good in me, show me how to make it right." The next morning, he received a message from someone he had hurt long ago: a message of kindness, unexpected and undeserved. He wept, not because everything was fixed, but because in that moment, he knew God had heard him. That message was not coincidence. It was the gentle hand of God saying, asterisk, here is your second chance. Take it, asterisk. It is not always easy to accept that grace. Pride resists it. Fear questions it. The human heart struggles to believe that what was broken can be whole again. But God has never been limited by our mistakes. He takes what we call ruined and calls it redeemed. He takes the ending we mourn and turns it into a beginning. When he says, someone wants a second chance with you because of this, it may also mean that you are being invited to have a second chance with yourself, to believe again, to trust again, to love again. Life will keep testing that faith. Storms will come, and you will wonder if you misheard the voice of hope. But every storm has a secret, within its roar is the promise of renewal. The rain that beats against you today will water the ground where tomorrow's blessings will grow. And if you look closely, you will see that the very trials you feared were destroying you are the same ones that are shaping your strength. To live by faith is to live by invisible hands. You cannot see them, but you feel their support. You know that if they had not held you, you would have fallen. And even when you doubt, even when you stumble, those hands do not let go. God does not measure worth by perfection, He measures it by willingness. Every moment you choose hope instead of despair, forgiveness instead of resentment, love instead of fear, you open a new channel for His power to move through you. If you have ever stood at the edge of giving up and somehow found the courage to take one more step, you have already met that invisible power. If you have ever been comforted by a friend's unexpected kindness or felt peace in the middle of your tears, you have touched the hem of divine mercy. That is God, alive and present, working through the ordinary fabric of your days. And perhaps now, as you read these words, something within you stirs. Maybe there is someone you once loved deeply but lost through misunderstanding or pride. Maybe there is a dream you buried because life seemed to say no. Maybe there is a version of yourself you have not met in years, the hopeful one, the forgiving one, the believer. And maybe God is whispering to you, asterisk, this is your moment. Someone wants a second chance with you because of this, not only a person, but life itself. Take my hand, and let us begin again, asterisk, there is a sacred rhythm to life that we rarely notice when we are rushing. We move from one moment to the next, searching for answers, demanding signs, asking God to explain the plan. Yet the divine often speaks not in explanations but in gentle invitations. When everything falls apart, the invitation is to trust. When someone reaches out after years of silence, the invitation is to forgive. When an opportunity seems lost but then reappears, the invitation is to believe that what is meant for you will find its way back, reshaped by grace. In those seasons of confusion, you may wonder whether God has turned His face away. Prayers feel unanswered, and the silence of heaven can be heavier than the noise of suffering. But silence is not absence. It is in the silence that your heart becomes capable of hearing the subtler voice, the one that says, "Be still, I am working." Think of how a seed lies buried beneath the soil. Nothing seems to happen for a long time. The ground above is hard, the darkness below is cold. Yet within that darkness, life begins. The seed breaks, the shell splits, and something new pushes upward, seeking the light. That is how God works in you. The breaking you feared is not the end, it is the beginning of growth. Many times, God allows us to experience the ache of loss because through it, He teaches us how to love without possession. He teaches us how to forgive without being asked, how to release without resentment. He does not take away to punish, He removes what hinders us from becoming whole. So when someone comes back into your life asking for a second chance, it is not always about restoring what was, sometimes it is about redeeming what could be. It is a divine rehearsal for mercy, a chance to see the face of God in the reflection of another soul asking for forgiveness. When the heart opens to that level of grace, everything begins to look different. The very memories that once brought pain begin to shine with meaning. You see how each wound shaped your compassion, how each disappointment taught you endurance, how each unanswered prayer redirected you to something greater. You start to realize that even when you thought God was silent, He was orchestrating something you could not yet understand. Imagine walking down a road where fog covers the path ahead. You can only see one step at a time, but you trust that the road continues. That is what faith looks like in real life. God rarely shows the entire journey, He gives you just enough light for the next step. The invisible power that sustains you is not found in knowing the destination, but in trusting the guide. And each step of trust becomes a prayer, each act of kindness a seed of the new life He is building in you. There is a story told of a woman who carried bitterness for years after a broken relationship. She believed forgiveness was impossible. But one day, she found herself in a church she had not planned to visit, drawn there by something she could not name. As she sat quietly, a verse was read, "Behold, I make all things new." The words pierced her heart. For the first time, she saw her pain not as a curse but as a passage. She began to pray for the person who had hurt her, not because he deserved it, but because she needed to be free. Months later, that very person reached out, not to rekindle romance, but to ask forgiveness. And when she heard his voice, she felt no anger, only peace. In that moment she knew, God had given her a second chance at peace, not necessarily at the relationship, but at herself. This is the mysterious beauty of divine power. It doesn't always fix situations, it transforms souls. The change happens inside you first. You begin to see through eyes washed by grace. You understand that forgiveness is not weakness but strength, that love is not foolishness but the highest wisdom. The invisible power that once held you up in your darkest hour is now teaching you how to hold others with the same tenderness. As days pass, you start to notice small miracles. A door opens where there was none. A conversation heals a wound you had forgotten. A stranger's smile reminds you that kindness still exists. These are not coincidences, they are the fingerprints of God scattered across your days, reminders that you are being guided, that the path is unfolding as it should. When God says, "Someone wants a second chance with you because of this," He might not only be speaking of human relationships but of your relationship with purpose, with calling, with faith. Maybe you stopped believing that your life could still hold meaning after all you've lost. Maybe you've been waiting for a sign that you can begin again. This is that sign. The same power that lifted you from despair now beckons you to rise into new beginnings. There comes a moment when you realize that grace does not erase the past, it redeems it. Every mistake becomes a teacher, every heartbreak a doorway, every loss a sacred whisper saying, "Look how far you've come." The second chance God gives is never a repeat of the first, it's always deeper, wiser, softer. It carries the memory of pain but also the miracle of survival. If you pause for a moment and look back, you will see that every valley had its hidden blessings. You will remember how many nights you thought you couldn't go on, and yet you did. You will recall the tears that fell silently but became prayers that reached heaven. You will recognize that the invisible power holding you was not some distant force but the presence of God within you, the same presence that has always been there, waiting for you to trust it fully. And now, as the story unfolds, there is a quiet strength rising in you. You may not know where the next turn leads, but you know who walks beside you. The same voice that once said, "Peace, be still," to the storm now speaks that peace into your heart. The same hands that lifted you before are ready to lift you again. All that is required is your yes, your willingness to let love lead the way once more. The journey of faith rarely moves in a straight line. It bends and circles, rises and falls, often returning to places we thought we had left behind. Yet every return carries a difference, for we come back changed, carrying new understanding. When God moves us toward a second chance, it is not so we can relive the past but so we can meet it with a renewed heart. What once broke us now becomes the soil where wisdom grows. There is something profoundly sacred about the moments when life comes full circle. You may find yourself standing again in the same place where you once wept, but this time you are not the same person. The pain that once felt unbearable now feels like a teacher. You can finally look back without resentment, because you see that the loss had purpose. You see that the invisible power that held you through those long nights was shaping something eternal inside you: strength, compassion, humility, faith. Often, we mistake delay for denial. We think that because something did not happen when we wanted it to, God has said no. But divine timing is not human timing. What feels like waiting to us is often preparation to Him. A door may close, not because it is wrong, but because we are not yet ready to walk through it. When the moment comes, everything aligns so naturally that it feels as though it was always meant to be. That is how God works, with perfect, patient precision. In the quiet of your soul, you may remember a time when you prayed for something with all your heart, a relationship, a dream, a chance, and it did not come. You mourned the absence, questioned the silence, maybe even felt forgotten. But then, later, something unexpected happened. Maybe years had passed, and suddenly the very thing you once longed for appeared again, changed, refined, timed perfectly for your growth. That is not coincidence, that is divine orchestration. God does not forget your prayers, He fulfills them in the way that will bless you most deeply. When someone returns to you asking for a second chance, it can stir up fear. Memories rise, doubts whisper, "What if it happens again?" But faith does not erase fear, it teaches you to walk through it. If the heart feels a quiet peace beneath the uncertainty, that is often God's gentle confirmation. He does not want you to live imprisoned by the past. He wants you to live free, wise, and open. There was once a man who had lost touch with his best friend after a bitter argument. Years passed. Both changed, matured, softened. One day, without reason, he felt an impulse to write a letter. Not to justify, not to explain, just to say, *I hope you're well. I miss your presence in my life, *. He almost didn't send it, afraid of rejection, but something inside urged him. Days later, a reply arrived, *. I was praying you'd reach out. I've been wanting to make peace, *. Both wept as they realized how many years had been lost to pride. Yet even in the loss, there was a strange gratitude, because now they could see what the years of distance had taught them. The invisible power that had once held their hearts apart in mercy was now drawing them together in grace. That is the nature of divine love. It waits until both hearts are ready. It never forces, it prepares. And when the moment is right, it weaves people and circumstances together with a tenderness no human effort could accomplish. But not every second chance involves another person. Sometimes, it's about your relationship with yourself. There are parts of you you've rejected, mistakes you can't forgive, dreams you've buried, gifts you've ignored because you thought you weren't enough. Yet God never discards what He creates. Every piece of you has purpose. The broken pieces reveal where the light enters. The forgotten pieces are waiting to be reclaimed. When God says, someone wants a second chance with you, perhaps that someone is your own soul, longing to return home to who you truly are. You were not created to live in regret. You were created to live in redemption. The invisible power that sustains you is the same force that renews creation itself. Just as dawn returns each morning after the darkest night, grace rises within you no matter how deep the shadow. You are never too far gone, never too broken, never too late. Many people spend their lives haunted by what could have been. They replay choices, conversations, lost moments. But God does not live in what could have been, He lives in what can still be. Every breath is a chance to begin again. Every sunrise is a reminder that yesterday's failures do not define you. The invisible power that holds the stars in their courses holds your heart as well, whispering, *rise again. Try again. Trust again, *. If you could see what God sees when He looks at you, you would never doubt your worth again. He sees not your scars, but the story they tell. He sees the courage behind your tears, the faith behind your fears. He sees a soul still capable of infinite love, even after heartbreak. That vision is what draws His mercy to you again and again. You are His beloved creation, and He delights in giving you new beginnings. Perhaps that is what this moment is, a divine pause between what was and what will be. You may not yet know how the story ends, but God does. And in His story, every ending is the seed of a new chapter. The invisible hand that carried you through the storm is still guiding you, still writing, still redeeming. And so, when you look back at your life, the battles, the tears, the waiting, you begin to see a divine pattern in all of it. You realize that nothing was wasted, not even the pain. Every closed door redirected you, every unanswered prayer protected you, every heartbreak deepened you. The invisible power that once felt distant was never far away, it was guiding every step, preparing every turn, shaping every part of you into someone capable of greater love. That realization fills you with peace. You stop demanding to understand and instead rest in trust, knowing that what is meant for you will never be lost when God is the author of your story. And perhaps that is the real miracle, not that everything becomes perfect, but that you are able to walk in peace even when it isn't. You learn that faith is not about avoiding storms but about finding calm within them. You learn that forgiveness is not weakness but freedom, that love does not always mean holding on, sometimes it means letting go with grace. And when someone asks for a second chance, or when life itself whispers that it's time to begin again, you respond not with fear but with faith. You remember how many times God gave you a second chance, how often He lifted you when you could not lift yourself, and your heart opens easily, naturally, like a flower turning toward light. So here you stand, stronger, gentler, wiser. The road behind you shimmers with meaning, and the road ahead glows with possibility. The invisible power that carried you is still here, quiet but steadfast, holding you just as firmly as ever. And as you take your next step, you feel a deep knowing within your soul, that God is not only the giver of second chances but the source of every heartbeat, every sunrise, every moment of grace that whispers, "You are not alone." You never were. You never will be.